Thank you so much, everybody. All right, well, I'm back for another concert tonight. Thank you so much for listening. And see, my friends from Seattle are here. Bill Huffman, who's usually in Pennsylvania, but not right now. Dave Goodlaxon. Tonight's concert is entitled Ragtime Heroes. So the idea occurred to me this week to do a tribute to some of the ragtime musicians that I listen to most often, the ones that I really love that have inspired me to play this kind of music, ragtime and early jazz, both, of course. And I thought about calling the concert Ragtime, the Ragtime Revivalists, but that's kind of similar to the title of one of the CDs that I recorded, which is Revival Ragtime, meaning contemporary ragtime. That's not really what I mean. I'm talking about the people that revived the original ragtime music, and then primarily in the 1950s and 60s. 1970s, of course, is when the movie The Sting came out. But the original ragtime revival actually started earlier than that. And one of the very first people to make ragtime piano records after the music had died and big bands had come into play was Wally Rose, who lived his whole life in San Francisco. And one of the very first records he made, I believe it was as early as 1941, was the Black and White Rag. So that was the first tune I played, later a big hit for Winifred Atwell. And that record of Black and White Rag, on the other side was Lou Waters' Yerba Buena Jazz Band playing the Maple Leaf Rag. It's one of my very favorite records that was ever made of the Maple Leaf. And of course, Wally was the pianist with that jazz band. But anyhow, I'm going to start out with some more of the tunes that Wally Rose revived from the original ragtime period. And he was one of the very first people to ever perform and record the 5 pastime rags written by Artie Matthews, one of the true classic ragtimers from St. Louis. And there's 5 of those tunes, and I'm going to play number 3 for you, which has a great tango rhythm to it, and we'll talk more about Wally in a minute. But for now, here's the pastime rag number 3 by Artie Matthews. you so much. That's Pastime Rag number 3. Yeah, the figures of the ragtime revival, which started way out on the West Coast in the 1940s, are the people that I really seem to idolize the most as musicians. Wally Rose, Johnny Maddox, Noy Parker, Trebor, Tichenor, Bob Darch. We're going to talk about all those people tonight and play some of the music that they loved and that I have been inspired to learn from recordings and so forth. And so let's do another one that I was inspired to learn after hearing Wally Rose play it. Wally Rose, of course, recorded with Lou Waters' jazz band, and then later on in the 1950s made a number of records for major labels like Columbia Records. And I think the one that I love the most is called Ragtime Piano Masterpieces. Unfortunately, it was done on a horrible out-of-tune piano. But despite that, the performances on the record are just so good that I could listen to it over and over. And one of the tunes that Wally recorded is this number. Here's the original copy of it, called the Rooster Rag. So I'll do the Rooster Rag next for you. This was written by Muriel Pollock, who was one of the great female pianists of the ragtime and novelty piano styles. She wrote this in 1917. She could not have been very old when she wrote this. And the opening section of Rooster Rag is also found in the very first Pastime Rag. It's the same melody, almost the same 16 measures. Just maybe it was one of those musical strains that floated around the country and we don't really know where it came from, but I have always loved Rooster Rag. Here it goes. That's the Rooster Rag. Thank you, folks. Let me check both streams here. Oh boy, got some folks watching from Sweden tonight. My goodness, thanks for tuning in. If you're just joining me, I do accept virtual tips for my concerts. All you have to do is send in a tip on PayPal or Venmo like you would in person. And if you don't trust those avenues, I have a P.O. Box on my website for checks too. I still get one of those once in a while, and it's been very helpful to my career. And I'm happy to answer requests tonight too if I can do it. It has to be something that I kind of know by heart, and I prefer if it fits the theme of the concert. That's how I try and do it. Not always, but most of the time. And I brought out a little bit of memorabilia tonight that I thought would be fun to share with you. Some of these folks that revived ragtime music, when that first happened in the 1940s especially, and 50s, I never got to meet them. They died before I was born, but I do have right here beside me Wally Rose's wallet with his last $2 in it, some business cards, and I probably shouldn't be showing this online, but I have his passport too. There's a picture of Wally, and it's signed by Walter L. Rose, which is pretty wonderful. Peter Minton gave me these. He was a close friend of Wally's, of course. They were both pianists from San Francisco who worked in some of the same nightclubs and so forth. And so I love a lot of the recordings that Nocky did. Wally. He's one of my favorites. And I'm going to do one more for you that I was inspired. A lot of people have been inspired to learn and play this piece because Wally Rose recorded it for Columbia Records. It's an obscure tune that came out of New Orleans in 1917, and it's called the Triangle Jazz Blues. It was right at that period when ragtime was becoming jazz, and it's just such a unique and quirky piece of music. I think actually the way Wally played it, slightly better than the way it was originally written. So he's the inspiration here. Triangle Jazz Blues. The Triangle Jazz Blues. Thank you, folks. My goodness, got listeners in New Zealand tonight too. Well, I'm sorry I don't have any of my Australian or New Zealand tunes prepared for tonight. It'd be better if I practiced them first. But I did practice some good new tunes, actually several that I've never performed for tonight. And I'm going to keep moving here and play some of those for you. Happy to take requests though. I'm sure some of my listeners tonight actually may have met some of the musicians that I'm talking about while I'm performing, especially the figures like Johnny Maddox and Bob Darch and so forth. Wow, yeah, we've got Canada tuned in tonight too. Well, we're going to represent Canada with John Arpin tonight. In the meantime, let's talk about another one of the piano players that I just absolutely love. And I've always liked him, but I've been spending a lot of time the last few months transferring some of his vinyl records so that I can listen to more and more of his work. And his name was Noy Parker, Dr. John Noy Parker. And he was from Texas. And not unlike Wally Rose, he started recording and reviving ragtime and early jazz in the 1940s, you know, just after the original period had ended. In fact, Noy was almost an original period pianist because he started with the Light Crust Doughboys, the Western swing band from Texas in the mid-1930s. His first records go back to the mid-1930s, that is Noy. And later on, he recorded for Audiophile Records, the same label as Trebor Tichenor and the St. Louis Ragtimers. And let me do a tune that should be a little bit more familiar to you, and this is the Noy Parker arrangement, which I sort of picked this up by ear. It's not note for note, but it's a very popular, it's a ragtime song that came out in 1916 and became more of a traditional jazz standard over the years. This is I Ain't Got Nobody. So much. I Ain't Got Nobody, and Nobody Cares for Me. That was originally written by Charlie Warfield, who was one of the black ragtime pianists from St. Louis. He also wrote a famous song called Baby Won't You Please Come Home. And if you find the original copy of each song, it has his name on it. And later on, Clarence Williams, the music publisher, put his name as a composer on those tunes. Well, now, one of the other things that Noy Parker was known for was not just classic ragtime, obviously. He did a lot of Jelly Roll Morton. That was one of his favorites and played in New Orleans. and of course kept up the Western swing music for years. Smokey Montgomery was the banjo player with the Light Crust Doughboys, and the two of them seem to have worked together for decades. I wish I knew more about Nocky. There's probably not too many around now that actually knew him. But I thought it'd be fun to do a Roll Morton piece that I've never performed before. So I pulled out a number, and it's a little bit scandalous. This is something that Roll Morton recorded later on in his life as an example of the kind of things that they used to do in New Orleans in the early 1900s. And it's called the Naked Dance. Jelly Roll said that was considered high art in New Orleans at the time. And this is something that also the famous piano player Tony Jackson used to do. And this copy of the sheet music is from about 1950. J. Lawrence Cook, the piano roll artist, did transcriptions of Jelly Roll Morton's records. This is probably the best version of it. And so we're going to do the Naked Dance now, with a few of the licks that Noy Parker used. He recorded it multiple times, but this is pretty close to actually the way that Morton played it. This is the first time I've ever played it. Hope it doesn't get taken down off of Facebook. The Naked Dance. That's the Naked Dance. Thank you very much, everybody. I see an interesting comment here on the Facebook stream. Do you like new tunes? That's difficult to answer. There are some I like. They're just kind of few and far between. And I figure, you know, everybody else, it seems, in the world is into modern music, so why don't I do something different? That's why I love ragtime, early jazz especially, and I focus on that so much. There are a few newer show tunes and things that I don't mind, like the music of Kander and Ebb, for instance, from the musical Chicago. Well, what would we like to hear, folks? I kind of get in my mind ahead of time for these concerts what I want to play, but I don't mind changing it, kind of veering off course a little bit. Hey there to Joe Sell in Arizona. So glad you could listen tonight. Miss you. Yeah, Kelly, I'm going to play some of those John Arpin pieces. I'm going to save that for the end of the concert, though. And maybe the next thing I'll do is move right ahead and talk about my musical mentor, Johnny Maddox, who started making records very early on in the ragtime revival. His first record was made in May of 1950 in his hometown of Gallatin, Tennessee. And I have, speaking of memorabilia tonight, here's Johnny's watch that he gave me when he retired. It's a Hamilton Railroad watch, which is fitting for me since I love trains. And it looks very vintage in style, but a friend of mine looked up the serial number, so it's actually slightly newer than we thought it was. It's a 1946 Hamilton 992B. Anyhow, Johnny's first record was Crazy Bone Rag, so I could play that for you. One of the other tunes that he revived I thought I might do is Yellow Dog Blues. Let me know which of those you prefer. I'm trying to watch both streams here. Oh, Bill, yeah, I forgot that. Hamilton watches were made in Lancaster. Well, I think I'm going to have plenty of time in the concert tonight. I'll do both. Yeah, that's what Dave says, both. We'll do Crazy Bone Rag and tell you more about the other one in a minute. Crazy Bone was written in 1913 by Charles L. Johnson from Kansas City. Before too long, I want to do at least part of a concert devoted to Charles L. Johnson. For now, here's the Crazy Bone, the way that Johnny recorded it in 1950, years later. Thank you so much. There's Crazy Bone Rag. Oh my, yes. I'm receiving a question here on Facebook whether I know railroad songs. I could probably come up with a dozen of them, but I have already done a whole virtual concert devoted to railroad songs. It's called On the Rails, something like that. And you can still watch it on YouTube. And that's not to say I may not do it again either. Wow. Oh, I'm so glad you're listening, Marilyn. I saw you requested Tango Fredette. I'll do that in a minute. Let's do Yellow Dog Blues next, an early blues tune. This was written by W.C. Handy, of course, who is the father of the blues from Memphis, Tennessee. And it's named for the Yazoo Delta Railroad, which was nicknamed the Yellow Dog Line and ran up and down the Mississippi River. And Johnny did have a hit record on this in the 1950s. I don't know if you call it a hit, but it was on the Billboard charts. It reached, I don't know, 80 or 90 something on the Billboard charts in the late 1950s, about 1957 or 58. It was one of his last records that was on the Billboard charts. There might have been one or two after that. But we'll do the Yellow Dog Blues for you now. The original title was the Yellow Dog Rag. In the early days, ragtime and blues were pretty similar. The blues were not played real slow and sad like you hear them today. They were played more up-tempo for dancing. Hey, greetings there to Bob Trafton in Boston. So glad you're listening tonight. Yellow Dog Blues. Blues. Thank you so much, everybody. You know, I didn't think that's actually a railroad tune. Like I say, it was named for the Yazoo Delta line. And in the words of the song, Handy said, "Your easy rider's gone where the Southern crossed the Yellow Dog," which referred to where the Yazoo Delta and Southern Railway crossed at Moorhead, Mississippi. That's what that was about. Yeah, I was just saying that, Amy. I seem to get requests for Tom Breyer's music almost every week. I might do that tonight, but it'd be better towards the end of the concert as sort of a finale. If you haven't hit the like button, please do that. Go ahead and share the stream on Facebook and so forth too. It helps with the social media algorithms. No, I don't know Buck Snort's Stomp by heart. We'll do some Trebor Tichenor music here in just a little bit. I have one more thing that I need to do before we leave the music of Johnny Maddox. I got a request from Marilyn Schoon for Tango Fredette. I will throw in a couple of pieces that are more contemporary ragtime numbers. This is really a tango, and it's the best thing Johnny ever wrote. Sometime in the 1990s, I believe. The idea came to him while he was staying down in Florida with his girlfriend Fredette, and so hence this is called Tango Fredette. Thank you so much. Tango Fredette. I see the request for Ham and. I might play that for you just here in a minute. Trebor Tichenor recorded that. The idea for tonight's concert is to celebrate all the men that revived ragtime music in the 1950s and 60s. I called the concert Ragtime Heroes, so I can kind of fit that in. Yeah, sure. And Roberto Clemente I've never played. And I like to go through the history of music kind of chronologically when I do my concerts. So let me do one more musician here, and then I'll get one of those requests. We're going to talk about Ragtime Bob Darch, and he was among the very most important of all the ragtime revivalists. I never got to meet him, sadly. I came real close. If I had started performing a year or two earlier, I may have gotten to meet Bob Darch. And actually, this next tune is a request. I received a request ahead of time from the pianist Peter Lundberg in Sweden, and he suggested this number. Now, I've never played it before, but I practiced it, and I think it's a really excellent rag in the classic style. This is Bob Darch's Opera House Rag. His career started in the mid-1950s. He wrote this tune in 1960, I believe, and it's named for Piper's Opera House in Virginia City, Nevada, where Bob Darch was playing at the time. And one of the things that Darch did that few of the other musicians were able to do, not to such a great extent, is that he would track down the original ragtime composers and performers and interview them and get them to play again for the public. And you'll see on the cover of this, it actually says arranged by Joseph Lamb. I think Lamb may have had a hand in helping Darch arrange or edit this piece a bit. It would have been right before Lamb died, about the same year. And I read the new book about Bob Darch, and the notes about Piper's Opera House inside this piece of music were written by Beebe and Clegg, the famous railroad historians that wrote dozens of books about American railroads in the 1950s and 60s. I'm not sure whether it was Lucius Beebe or Charles Clegg. I'd have to check the book again. They were a couple that owned their own private railroad car and traveled around the country together. Really interesting guys. I think it's fascinating that Bob Darch was connected with them. But without further ado, let's do the Opera House Rag. much. That's the Opera House Rag. It's a really great piece. Bob Darch wrote a lot of music, but unfortunately, relatively few were published as sheet music. And that's the only one you ever really find when you're scouring the collectible places, eBay and the ragtime festivals for his music. That's all that ever turns up is the Opera House Rag. But another one that he had a big hand in, which would be fun to play, is, and I know Amy loves this, she's listening tonight from Seattle, this is the Calliope Rag. Darch found part of a manuscript by James Scott, who was from Carthage, Missouri, and finished the piece himself. I'm not sure exactly how much is by Scott or Lamb, we don't know, but it's a great piece no matter how you look at it. Oh, Vincent's never heard Opera House Rag. Yeah, it's really good. Darch recorded it too with a band. It's really good. And on the tape I found of Joseph Lamb, he's discussing the piece with Lamb. So it's not just made up where it says arranged by Joseph Lamb on the cover of the music. Anyway, let's do the old Calliope Rag. Thank you so much, folks. Oh my goodness, we've got a listener from Japan tonight. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. I wish I knew. What's that famous Japanese song? Johnny recorded it. Not Sayonara. Sukiyaki. I wish I knew that. I've got to learn that for the people I meet from Japan. Well, I got a request. This is from David Lindsay, I believe, on YouTube. Yeah, he wanted to hear a rag called Ham And, which was written by Scott Joplin's piano student Arthur Marshall. And the theme for tonight's concert is Ragtime Heroes, the people that revived the music in primarily the 1950s and 60s, the ones I'm talking about. And one of those guys was Trebor Tichenor from St. Louis. He was the real king of ragtime if there ever was one. And I just happened to think about pulling out, before I started the concert, here's my copy of Trebor's very first record. If you have trouble with his name, Trebor is Robert backwards. Trebor J. Tichenor. And this record came out in 1966. I really treasure this. You won't be able to see it on the YouTube, I guess, but Trebor signed it for me here in the corner. It says, "To Adam Swanson, a great ragtime pianist. Best regards always, Trebor Tichenor, August 2008. Now, to receive those words from Trebor is one of the highest compliments I've ever received. And so, just by coincidence, here on this record is Arthur Marshall's Ham and in Ragtime. No eggs. That's the title of the tune, Ham and. Thank you, everybody. That record that Trebor made, I love it. It was done on an old cable upright piano on the Goldenrod Showboat in St. Louis in '66, I believe, which means Trebor would have been a fair bit younger than me at the time. Yeah, David, glad you got to hear that. I was planning before to play one of the pieces that Trebor himself wrote, and it's also on that same record, and it was probably the first recording ever done of the tune. He wrote it around the same time. This is one of his originals. We'll do the Show Me Rag, named for the Show Me state of Missouri, and his music, he called it folk ragtime, the early ragtime styles. That's what he loved the best. That term was never really used in the original period, but it's become very popular since then. This is true Trebor Tichenor folk ragtime, the Show Me Rag. And there's Show Me Rag. Thank you so much, folks. If you're just joining me, or if you haven't heard one of my virtual concerts before, I do accept virtual tips for these performances. All you have to do is send in a tip on PayPal and Venmo, just like we were in person in a restaurant or a bar or something. And I also have a P.O. box on my website for checks. The PayPal and Venmo stuff is in the description on both the YouTube and Facebook video. I see some folks talking on Facebook about how that rag sounds a lot like bluegrass music. That's very true. That's because of some of the odd harmonies in the first section of the piece. Yeah. Well, most American music like that is sort of interrelated anyway. So, do we have any more requests tonight, folks? I've told you what I have sort of planned ahead of time for the concert. There may be a few people that I should have tried to represent in this concert that I haven't planned on. One of those might be Dick Zimmerman, who is a very influential figure in the ragtime movement, helped start the Maple Leaf Club in Los Angeles in the 1960s. He's one of the few people of that generation of the ragtimers who's still kicking. I hate to say it, but that's true. Oh, Alex, I wish I could play one of the William Bolcom pieces for you tonight. I'm afraid I don't know any of them by heart. I've had the good fortune to meet and play in 2 different concerts with Bolcom over the years. Met him twice and had him sign my copy of the book that he wrote on Eubie Blake. One of my favorites that Bill Bolcom wrote, everyone knows Graceful Ghost Rag. Everyone loves that. Everyone plays it over and over at the ragtime festivals, but he wrote a couple that I love that don't get played quite as much. I like them better, to be honest with you. They're more like the old rags. He wrote one called Knight Hubert for Eubie Blake. His real name is Hubert, Eubie. And he also wrote one for Eubie Blake called Rag and Rudy. That's terrific. If I had the music in front of me, I'd play one of those for you. But I do need to play a Max Morath tune tonight, so let's do Max Morath. He got his start in the 1950s at the Imperial Hotel in Cripple Creek, Colorado. I assume it's still there. I've never been to Cripple Creek. I'd love to see that. And I already did Max's Gold Bar Rag last week, so I think what I will do tonight is another one that he wrote later on called One for the Road. Let's do One for the Road. Oh boy, I'm getting more Tom Breyer requests. I should have known. I'll do that at the end of the concert. Here's One for the Road by Max Morath. That's One for the Road by Max Morath. Thank you, folks. Kevin Parcher on Facebook asks, I wonder, did they really play them that fast back in the day? All you have to do is listen to the original 78 records of the period. No, they were not limited to 3 minutes on a record. Ragtime generally was upbeat music. It was primarily dance music and also vocal music, and the people who sang the tunes in vaudeville. It's a misnomer today that it was primarily piano music. Scott Joplin may have been one of the few exceptions as far as how he wanted his music played. We don't really know all that much. It could have been the music publisher who put in Joplin's music, do not play fast. And generally speaking, the music is kind of upbeat and happy. That's one of the reasons I've always loved it. Let me see now. I'm going to save the Tom Breyer requests for later on in the concert, and let me mention a fellow that I became very good friends with, who was also an important musician on the scene, who helped revive ragtime and particularly the old vaudeville songs. He was on Tower Records in the 1960s, which was a subdivision of Capitol Records. His name was Ian Whitcomb. I was lucky enough to work with Ian for a number of years, and He was a British rock star who came over here from England and had about 3 rock and roll hits on the Billboard charts in the 60s. But he had one tune that was a hit for him on Tower Records that was not rock and roll. And this is an old ragtime song from 1916, originally introduced by Al Jolson, and it was a minor hit for Ian. It came under at about 101 on the Billboard charts. I think Ian was frustrated about that. It was almost a hit. This is Where Did Robinson Crusoe Go with Friday on Saturday Night. The words to the song are really clever. Every Saturday night he would start into Rome, and on Sunday morning he'd come stumbling home. On this island were wild men in cannibal trimmings, and where there are wild men, there must be wild women. So where did Robinson Crusoe go with Friday on Saturday night? Robinson Crusoe go with Friday on Saturday night. Thank you, folks. Oh, Larry Milton says, Max listened as you played One for the Road. Oh my, how flattering. That's Max Morath. He lives up in Duluth, Minnesota now. Are you in touch with Diane, Larry? Let me know. I've always loved Max's music. I have done Gold Bar Rag and One for the Road. I know both of those by heart. I was just thinking that I need to learn polyragmic next. It's a really neat piece that he wrote. Rag that goes into a lot of different time signatures, has different odd rhythms to it. Well, now let's see. I was talking about Ian Whitcomb, who was another one of the great ragtime revivalists. Let me play you one of Ian's original compositions. This is also from the mid-60s. I think it's one of the best rags he wrote. Even though he wasn't highly skilled pianist, he was primarily a singer and entertainer. He wrote some wonderful instrumental rags. And this one, he said, was kind of inspired by Joseph Lamb. It's called Sandcastle. Published by the Maple Leaf Club in Los Angeles in the 60s. So let's do Sandcastle next. you so much. That's Sandcastle, A Day by the Sea. That's the subtitle, something like that. The music of Ian Whitcomb. Yeah, I'm so lucky that I was in the right place at the right time to meet a lot of these legendary musicians, the people who revived this music, kept it alive for generations. The people like Trebor Tichenor, Max Morath, Ian Whitcomb, Johnny Maddox. These are the guys that were my idols. I still love them. And one of them, and I'm extremely lucky, I got to work with him 3 times before he passed away. He died a little bit young. And that's John Arpin. I think we had some folks listening from Canada tonight. John Arpin, I think, is one of the finest pianists that ever lived. Eubie Blake said that he was he's so good that he could play a middle C and make you cry. That's really about how well he could play. And he was also the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. So I want to pay tribute to John Arpin, who was probably the main driving force behind the Toronto Ragtime Society for years. John and Bob Darch as well, perhaps. And John wrote a couple of wonderful tunes himself, and one of them, which I still like to play pretty often, this is called the Toronto Blues, so we'll do that next. Toronto Blues. Thank you so much, folks. Well, let me tell you what I was planning towards the end of the concert here. I see someone's talking about the pastime rags again. I played number 3, not number 4. Oh, Bob Milne's listening tonight. Talk about another one of the people that has really helped keep ragtime music alive for years. In fact, he was the first professional pianist that I ever saw play in live concert. It's no wonder I've loved ragtime music ever since. One of the things I thought I might do before I close tonight's program is I was inspired to create a medley of music written by Eubie Blake because of John Arpin. He was very good at that. He would create a long medley of tunes, and they were almost like classical fantasies. The themes of different composers, he would use them and weave them all together. And so I could do the Eubie Blake fantasy to close out tonight's concert, but I also noticed I had a number of requests for Tom Breyer's music, and so I could do one or two of his rags to close out as well. Let me know what you all want to hear. I bet I know what you're going to say. I think you're all going to type in the chat there, let's do both. So I may have to do both now that I've mentioned it. So what do you think? Wow. Oh, got a request for Percy Winrick. I can certainly do some of his music. I might save it for next week. In a sense, Eubie Blake was one of the people that helped keep ragtime music alive, even past the 1950s ragtime revival, because he lived so long and also became such a star, you know. So I'm getting too many different requests now. I'm distracted. Yeah, let's go ahead and do both of these things. And next up, we'll do the Eubie Blake fantasy. It starts out with Chevy Chase Rag, and then a couple of tunes from the Broadway musical Shuffle Along. We'll do I'm Just Wild About Harry, and Baltimore Buzz, and then Gypsy Blues, which is based on Victor Herbert's Gypsy Love Song. We'll do a tune that Eubie wrote called Loving You the Way I Do. No, it doesn't start with Chevy Chase Rag. It ends with Chevy Chase, and it starts with Memories of You, of course. That's my Eubie Blake medley. Thank you so much, everyone. Hey, we're getting over 100 viewers on YouTube tonight. Thanks so much. That's really meaningful. Thank you, everybody. And I do accept virtual tips for these concerts. I think most of you know that. We're getting towards the end of the program. I really appreciate all of that. Just, you know, $5 here and there really does help my career. Well, we're getting lots of requests for Tom Breyer's music, and I've got just enough energy and time that I'll go ahead and try and play Razor Blades for you. This is his most popular piece. I know about a half a dozen of them by heart. They're very difficult, so there's some that I can't do. Blue Lampshade, I don't know, but we'll do Razor Blades. There's Razor Blades. Thank you so much. Let's get a key change. How did you know I was going to do that? I just remembered I should have made an announcement earlier, which is that I'm not going to be able to do a virtual concert next Sunday night. I'm afraid I'll be in Texas for my mother's family reunion, and that's always a lot of fun, though. I'm sorry I won't be able to play, but I will be back 2 weeks from tonight. That I believe is the 24th or so of July. So please tune in on both Facebook and YouTube for another concert on the evening of July 24th. Thank you so much for the tips and listening tonight to the Ragtime Heroes concert. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Good night, folks.